Hello and welcome to this edition of the PA Political Digest podcast. I'm your host, GOP political consultant Christopher Nicholas, and this is part 3 of our continuing coverage of Pennsylvania's 4 hot congressional races, districts 1, 7, 8, and 10. We're the only state that has 3 toss-up races within it. So once again, all roads lead to the Keystone State to Pennsylvania. And to help me out today, to kind of give you an idea of what's going on in these races, I have brought in 3 distinguished colleagues, friends, reporters, starting off with Fallon Roth from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Hi, Fallon.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Tom Shortell from the Lehigh Valley News. Hi, Tom.
Good to see you. How are you?
And Borys Krawczeniuk from WVIA-TV and radio, and formerly of the Scranton Times-Tribune, correct?
Yep. Thanks. Hi. How are
Hey,
you?
Borys. How are you? So we have these 4 hot races. I'll cover District 10 since I happen to live in District 10 myself. So I don't like podcasts with lots of speakers and no one talks for 12 or 14 minutes. So we're going to get right now into a lightning round by district number of what are the 2 biggest recent developments in the race you're following. So Fallon, I'll start with you. Pennsylvania 1, incumbent Republican Brian Fitzpatrick. His Democratic opponent is current County Commissioner Bob Harvey. So in the first district there, all of Bucks County and an eastern sliver of Montco, what are the 2 big recent developments there?
Yeah, so the 2 biggest recent developments that we've been reporting on, one is this massive amount of labor support that Republican Brian Fitzpatrick is continuing to keep. He's maintained it pretty much election cycle after election cycle. And so we were curious if, given the national mood and the Trump administration's attacks on labor, if any were going to defect from the Republican, and it appears that they have not. The Harvey campaign, Commissioner Bob Harvey has been endorsed by 2 unions, and they say that discussions are ongoing for more endorsements perhaps later down the line, but that's kind of where things stand on labor support. The other is fundraising. Brian Fitzpatrick continues to have a massive war chest as well. A story that we reported on recently was Bob Harvey kind of lagging in comparison to the Democrats in the other 3 swing district races, and I'm sure we'll hear more about their fundraising from Tom and Borys, but it's interesting comparison between Harvey and his Democratic counterparts in the other races.
Harvey is kind of lagging the field against his other Democrats. And I've said for years that if you're at Bob Harvey, you're not just running against Brian Fitzpatrick, you're also running against the other Democrats in top races around you, because at some point everybody's budget runs out. So you mentioned that Fitz got some labor endorsement. He was endorsed by the entire AFL-CIO and also by the PSEA, the state affiliate of the National Education Association, NEA, PSEA. They're not in the AFL-CIO, they're separate. And in order to get AFL-CIO support, you have to get 2/3 plus 1 in the vote of their union. So it's a pretty high bar. And I think Harvey's been endorsed by Pennsylvania Federation of Teachers, which is the other teachers union, and then a couple others. So I'm Shortell there in the Lehigh Valley, the beautiful, wonderful Lehigh Valley. It's its own little part of the world. It's in the Philadelphia TV market, but it's got its own newspaper market, its own news delivery market, its own radio market. It's tough for anybody in the Lehigh Valley to get on Philadelphia TV unless they blow something up on purpose. So the race there in the 7th district is first-term Republican incumbent Ryan McKenzie, and he's facing off against firefighter union chief and lawn service owner Bob Brook, who had a tough primary to get through. So what are the 2 big developments there in recent weeks?
Well, I'll take the handoff from Fallon there and focus on the spending to lead off. We were digging into it. Both candidates, Ryan McKenzie had an uncontested Republican primary, has still spent $1.5 million so far into the cycle. Brooks spent about $1.3 million so far. But when you throw in all the outside spending, one of Brooks's opponents in the primary, Ryan Crosswell, a former federal prosecutor, he spent $1.6 million. The total spending so far this cycle has already outstripped what we saw in 2018, which I know it feels like ages ago, but wasn't that long ago. And that's like we had 2 contested primaries. So it's just, there was already more than $9 million spent in this race. It was one of the top 10 highest spending congressional races 2 years ago. It was more than $38 million. And we're already outpacing that. And as you've said, you alluded to the Philadelphia TV market. It's really expensive to kind of get on the airwaves. But we're still seeing a ton of spending in a race that has a lot of national importance, which is kind of a nice segue from my other point. We had Speaker Hakeem Jeffries in town on Sunday. He was ostensibly speaking to the 150 or so people in the room at the Steelworkers Union Hall, but his comments were more targeted for a national audience. It was 100 days. It's 100 days out from Election Day on Sunday, and he essentially delivered what I think we're going to start hearing a lot, talking about giving Republicans a pink slip, blaming them for breaking their promises on foreign wars, on gas prices, costs of goods, ruining the economy. He just kind of ran down the list, but he's delivering that in the PA7 platform. We routinely see this referred to as one of the top contested districts in the country. 2024, the race was decided by just 1 percentage point. Since they drew the maps in 2022, since 2020, I should go back a little bit further, slightly different district, but more or less the bulk of Lehigh, Northampton counties with some changes on the peripheries. But none of these races have been decided by as much as 3 points at this point. So we're seeing just like these political knife fights trying to get an edge. And with the House so tight, it feels like the road to the majority runs through the Lehigh Valley. And I'm sure that's true in 1 and 10 and 8 as well. But it really feels that way. And good luck convincing anybody here otherwise that they're not the most.
So Hakeem Jeffries, let's not give him a promotion yet. He's currently House Minority Leader. He's not the Speaker yet. I think one of the reasons he's doing all those road shows is he's running for Speaker, obviously.
Yeah, I might have misspoke there.
Yeah, he has some of those Democratic socialists on his far left that are publicly being forced to say they wouldn't vote for him for Speaker, because that's just how some of those things play out. The other side of that, though, is because it's inside Philadelphia TV market, to me, it's an incumbent-friendly district because it costs a lot of money to get on TV there, although Brooks is raising a lot of money and having a lot of money spent on his behalf. So, Borys, we're going to now look at the 8th congressional district, the district where you live. It is represented by freshman Republican Rob Bresnahan. He and Mackenzie 2 years ago flipped the 7th and the 8th. So your district is all within the Scranton TV market. So it's the cheapest one to play in of the 4 we're going to talk about today. What are the 2 big recent developments there?
Well, let me just correct you on one thing. The 8th is slightly Democratic by about 2.5 points.
You think so? In terms of voter registration? Okay, yeah, you're right. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So Trump won the district, but it is Democrat majority. Thank you.
Won it multiple times. The 2 biggest developments were Paige Cognetti, the Scranton mayor, who's the Democratic nominee, putting up her her second TV ad this week, and it's a really pointed one that goes after people who are reminding local voters of the history of coal and shale and the destruction of the environment here, and tying that to data centers, and then snapping shut a laptop with a story about Rob Bresnahan on it. That was a really interesting ad. And the other one was Bresnahan last week trying to make up for what Cognetti is portraying as his cardinal sin, and that's voting, promising to enact a stock ban when he was running for Congress, and then continuing to be one of the most, continue to trade stocks and be one of the most prolific stock traders once he got Congress. They are hammering him with that. So those are the 2 big developments over the last 2 weeks. He's essentially, promised for a while that he's going to do something about it, and the Republican vote on the stock trade ban last week was their effort to do something about it.
Your radio interview, I guess, with him, maybe it was also written about too, I think was,
What?
one of the places where that kind of broke out. When you had him on tape talking about, what do you want me to do? Not make any money or something like that. Can you remind us what that was about?
We were, he was basically saying that all the time that he's making all these efforts to improve the law, create a blind trust that, everything short of a stock ban at the time, although he was, he said he wanted to do something along those lines. He was pushing the House leadership for a blind trust at the time. And I said that kind of asked the obvious question, which was, you could just tell your broker to stop trading stocks. And his quote was something along the lines of, and then lose money. That doesn't seem fair. And his argument was that, if you do that, you're going to lose some really good people, good candidates for Congress if you have a stock trading ban.
So I will note before I go on to the 10th that the bill that came out of the House last week had a voter ID component to it, which is why I think all but 5 or 6 House Democrats voted against that stock trading ban act, and why, all but a handful of Republicans voted for it. It's very odd these days to see a vote which is bipartisan on both sides. There's R's and D's together. They're really not allowed to do that anymore, apparently. So here in the 10th District, South Central Pennsylvania, longtime incumbent Scott Perry is being challenged again by Janelle Stelson, a former TV reporter from Lancaster. Her big problem 2 years ago was that she didn't live in the district. She has remedied that by moving into an apartment in Cumberland County. The district is all of Dauphin, most of Cumberland, and half of York. And I'd say the two big developments here are the unions are coming back in again strong for Stelson. And I would say that she has $1.5 million more cash on hand as of June 30th than Perry does. You don't normally see that. These are numbers that Fallon, you helped put together from their own reports, but Stelson's cash on hand is about $4.5 million, and Perry's is about 2.8. So you don't normally see incumbents facing a challenger who's not a self-funder with that big of a difference. So I have not seen any TV ads yet for Stelson. I've noticed she's doing some digital advertising, but I haven't seen any ads yet. But with $4.5 million cash on hand, I think she should be able to do that pretty well. So of the 4 markets, Harrisburg is probably the third, if you count 1 and 7 both being in Philly and 8 up there in Scranton. So from a TV perspective, you don't have to buy multiple places. There is a small part of the 7th district in the Scranton TV market, but it's too small probably to be bought. So Fallon, you've been covering this congressional race for a while. What is the mood of the Harvey campaign coming off of these labor endorsements for Fitzpatrick? And obviously the money there is Fitzpatrick has $6.3 million cash on hand, and Harvey has about $800,000 cash on hand.
Yeah, I would say among the Harvey campaign and among the Democrats that are backing him in general, and including the DCCC, I would say that they're all still very optimistic. His allies, Harvey's allies, are continuing to promote him as somebody who is the strongest challenger that Fitzpatrick has faced yet. Harvey is the first challenger to Fitzpatrick who has won in the county twice for county commissioner. Obviously, a much smaller scale role and race than running for Congress, but still he has won in the county before. He's lived in the county pretty much his entire life. And so for those reasons, we're in July, you can look at that in 2 different ways. I keep saying to my colleagues is like, oh, wow, it's only the summer, there's still a lot of time until November. Or you can look at it in the flip side of like, we're actually not that far from November. So I guess it just depends how you look at it. From my take, it seems like they're optimistic that they still have a lot of time to make their mark.
Yeah, I don't know how you buy a lot of Philadelphia TV with only $800,000 cash on hand. Cash on hand means that's what's in your bank account.
I've been noticing a lot of digital ads from him recently.
A lot of digital ads.
Every time I go on social media, there's a new direct-to-camera Harvey ad.
Well, you live in Bucks County, so you would be obviously a target voter there. I grew up in Bucks County. I love Bucks County. You can't buy a lot of Philadelphia TV with $800,000 in the bank. Cash on hand just means after you've raised stuff and spent stuff, cash on hand is money you have left to play with. And that's the more important figure, not how much you've raised, but how much you have to actually still keep spending.
Uh,
Tom, Boris, go ahead.
I just wanted this cash on hand is important, certainly, but I think that what we're overlooking is the fact that there are going to be all these outside groups playing in all these elections, and that any kind of shortfall can be quickly overcome if Harvey can, for example, keep proving that he's a viable candidate, that he has a real chance at winning. I mean, in the 2024 election between Rob Bresnahan and Matt Cartwright, it was over $30 million overall in spending, and their portion was less than a third of that. So it can get crazy, and I think there's an understanding that Philly's more expensive. Scranton, Wilkes-Barre is relatively cheap, Harrisburg's relatively cheap, and that Lehigh Valley and Philadelphia are going to need more resources. At the same time, I think in Philly, the digital ads might have more effect only because it's a more affluent region, and people spend it's more middle to upper middle class than Lehigh Valley and the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area. So that could be part of their strategy. I don't know. I'm just guessing at this point.
Yeah, Boris, to that
Digital
point.
ads. Yeah, go ahead, Fallon.
Chris, I spoke to your friend Brittany Cramsey the other week, kind of about this situation, and it's very similar to what Boris had just mentioned. Talking about fundraising, she was saying there's, maybe a lot of individuals who are choosing to donate to other groups instead, who could then back Harvey when the time is right, or they're kind of just hedging a little bit, waiting to see what the national mood is going to be like, waiting to see if Governor Shapiro's poll numbers are still high before they go in on Harvey and publicly show that they're against someone, like Fitzpatrick.
What's the mood of the McKenzie campaign there in the Lehigh Valley? I felt so in the spring there was such a rambunctious Democratic primary that those candidates got a lot of attention, and McKenzie, for good or ill, was kind of just off to the side. So what are you hearing from Team McKenzie?
I think that they're really focused on presenting Ryan as the representative, as the serious candidate. He kind of tries to present himself as the guy who's focused on the work and not as less of more of a workhorse, less of a show pony. And so at the same time, his campaign loves trolling his opponents. Like they sent, I mentioned Ryan Crosswell, federal prosecutor. He moved to the district last April. So he's in the district for maybe a year, long enough to load a campaign. They send him a welcome basket. So they go out of their way to kind of poke at their opponents. And so the campaign and the candidate have walked this really interesting line of he's the serious candidate. He's the intelligent guy. He knows what the issues are. He was in the state house for over a decade. He's a relatively polished speaker. Brooks is the local baseball coach. He kind of delivers the same stump speech every time, and it's kind of turned into an inside joke among his supporters. If you saw the ads, and I don't know how you couldn't, because you were just being bombarded with it constantly. It was him talking about he's the working man candidate, but he doesn't go into the issues as much. It's not that he doesn't necessarily have a grasp of them or know where he's going to stand on them. It's just that public speaking is not his forte. And so McKenzie is trying to kind of present himself more as this statesman. And he's also working very hard to present himself as a moderate, even though he's voting with the Trump agenda frequently. So he has introduced legislation, or is about to introduce legislation on that stock trading ban. He wants to expand it to include candidates for Congress, which would include Bob Brooks, who has his wife has a pretty extensive list of things. So they're also doing their best to just kind of hammer Brooks on a lot of issues that you would expect wouldn't be there for a candidate of his stature. He was endorsed by the DCCC and Shapiro early in a contested primary, which is kind of...
They spent money on him in a primary, which is rare.
$1.7 million Voters is the this group that was the Bench as one of these PACs that's associated with the Democratic Party. A lot of labor unions, some wealthy individuals from out of the district, all contributed $1.7 million, nearly $1.8 million. So he's McKenzie is, I think, trying to showcase his bona fides and trying to show us that he forced the vote on. He was a deciding vote. No, obviously, Representative Fitzpatrick was as well, but he forced the vote on the ACA tax credits that got through the House by signing the disclosure, signing the petition. But so he's picking and choosing these moments where he can try to say, "Look, I'm a moderate," even though a lot of his votes don't necessarily would be interpreted that way by Democrats.
You know, one of the ways you can come off as a moderate is not just in your voting record, but in your tone and tenor. And I think in his tone and tenor, McKenzie, who I would describe as a professional legislator, does come off as a moderate. I think that's one of the differences between he and Bresnahan. Bresnahan was brand new to all of this, brand new to politics, brand new to being a voting member of a legislature. Whereas McKenzie, I think, pretty seamlessly went from, being a state House member to being a U.S. House member. Another interesting thing, you got.
He's very disciplined. I think where that difference is, and sometimes it's hard for me to make that distinguishment because I'm in the race and covering it so often, is that kind of that trolling aspect of the campaign. So like there's him on one side and the campaign on the other, and it's kind of walking this narrow line where yes, he is he's the disciplined candidate who he doesn't make mistakes, and I can't think of too many gaffes he's made in my many years covering him. And Brooks, by comparison, has multiple ones in just a couple of months.
Well, he's being sued by his former mother-in-law, so that's a big one. So here in the 10th district, here in the 10th district, Scott Perry, I think, is a disciplined guy, Army Brigadier General. He is an unreconstructed conservative. And sometimes that is good and sometimes that's not so good. And sometimes rebound challengers like a Janelle Stelson. And this is not because she's a Democrat or a woman or whatever. Sometimes they have a tougher time the second time around because they think, boy, last time I lost by 3,205 votes. So this year, all I need is 3,206 and I'll win. And of course, every campaign is different. So let's spend a moment now targeting some of what you think the Democrats will go after, what you think the Republicans will do going after Cognetti and after Harvey and after Brooks. So Borys, let's start with you. What do you think the Republicans are going to focus in on Paige Cognetti, who, as you said, is a multiple-term mayor of Scranton and did not have a primary?
Well, they've focused heavily on crime so far, although I don't know that they've decided on that as a direction. They did post she posed with two business owners who later were arrested for being part of a drug ring that's had some tie to the Crips. So they put up billboards around the area saying,
wow,
saying got Crips, and then having a link to the pagecripnetti.com. And all it is a link to a Breitbart story highlighting how the picture that was taken with the two business owners who were arrested and had links to the Crips. So that's been the primary focus so far. It feels like sometimes that they're still trying things out. They've tried out that, she hates fireworks. She was going to close down churches during COVID because people were still going to church, even though there was an exception to that in the shutdown protocols at the time. They've tried numerous things, and I think crime is what they're going to settle on. They've tried affluent. She and her husband own they call it
chalet.
Kind of I guess it's a ski. It's a little cottage at a ski resort, and they've tried to portray that as a chalet at a fairy tale resort. They've called her Portland Page because she's originally from Oregon, even though she's lived here 10 years. I don't think they've sent her a welcome basket, but they have highlighted that when Penn State played Oregon, they had pictures of her wearing her Oregon gear. Who's she rooting for, Penn State or Oregon?
Never underestimate the power of Penn State football fanhood here in Pennsylvania.
Maybe. I think the issue's a little more serious than that now, but so they've done.
Sure.
She's done her own fair amount of trolling when Bresnahan handed out pizzas to TSA workers at the airport during the shutdown. She tweeted out or put out on social media that, good, now they can pay their rent with that, that kind of thing. So it's gotten, they don't like, I'm getting this early sense that they don't really like each other very much.
You figured that out, have you, Borys?
No, but I mean, like, really personally don't like each other. Like, it will be an interesting race.
It'll keep you occupied. Fallon, how about down there in Pennsylvania 1? What are the Fitzpatrick folks going after Commissioner Harvey on?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty clear cut so far. The Republicans, and including the Fitzpatrick campaign, have been labeling Bob Harvey as the subject of, the wording always slightly changes, but like the subject of an FBI investigation. That all stems from a grand jury testimony that Harvey gave a few years ago, I want to say. It should be noted that he was never the subject of an investigation. He's never been under investigation. But Brian Fitzpatrick is a former FBI agent. And so I think painting that contrast has been key for them. It's something where you see a lot of ads, both on TV and digital, from the Fitzpatrick campaign about, and it's devolved into quite an issue. The Harvey campaign recently, earlier this month, sent a cease and desist to the Fitzpatrick campaign and a super PAC that's not affiliated with the Fitzpatrick campaign but has been supporting them for using defamatory language and in pointing out what they see as Harvey's role in an investigation. Again, he was never under investigation. I don't know.
Let me explain this.
Yeah.
Let me explain this. Before he was commissioner, he was a supervisor in Falls Township.
Correct.
And there was a long time FBI investigation there. People went after and did some bad things. So he was questioned as part of that because he was one of the heads of government there in Falls Township, which has either 5 or 7 supervisors. That predates his time as county commissioner, but it's never really been put to bed to me politically, so I can understand why Fitz is using it, especially given the fact that Fitzpatrick's a former FBI agent. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so the cease and desist is kind of where things stand. I'm not quite sure what exactly has come out of that from the side of the Fitzpatrick campaign. I am still seeing ads on TV that discuss the topic of Harvey and the FBI investigation. Maybe they have tweaked the language that I am not aware of to kind of skirt that. So we'll see where things stand on that, but that has been the main thing that they've been going after Harvey on.
So a cease and desist letter is basically a threat from a lawyer that if you don't cease doing X, we're going to go after you. So it's really,
I don't know if they've started ceasing. So
well, look, it's a good way to get press to write about it, right? It doesn't really mean anything. It's just kind of a threat. It tells you what they're worried about. So, Tom,
it could mean
go, Bart.
If the TV stations suddenly say, yeah, we agree with the Democrats. I've seen that happen. We're taking that ad off the air. That could be a victory. The TV stations get nervous about that thing. And I had a race 2 decades ago where that happened, where the TV stations took the ad off because one of the candidates said it was just factually wrong.
Yeah. normally TV stations, do the old thing where they smile and take your money.
That's right.
What is said is under the First Amendment. So Tom, what are you seeing the Team McKenzie going to go after Brooks on? I mentioned a couple minutes ago about his mother-in-law is suing him, former mother-in-law.
Yeah, his former mother-in-law sued her daughter and Brooks's ex-wife a couple years ago and won a nice settlement. A pretty nice sum, 6 figures. That number has gone up as Brooks hasn't paid it, and now there's allegations that he is trying to hide his wealth, and so that suit is ongoing. That's waiting to hear back from a county judge in that lawsuit. So it's kind of a new chapter in an old issue.
So Brooks's first mother-in-law got a judgment against him for not giving her all the money they agreed to when they bought her house, about $130,000. He hasn't paid it, and now with accrued penalties, I guess you would call it, It's up to like 180,000. And to me, one of the funniest
last
things,
I checked, it was 163. But yeah,
163. Okay, thank you. And to me, one of the funniest things is both of his wives have the same exact first name and middle name. So I just find that, only in Pennsylvania does that happen.
and that leads to some of the allegations. They're arguing that because of the confusion, because the names are so similar, their middle names are off by, or both women have the same middle name of Lynn, but it's spelled differently. And so that has led to some of the confusion. And there's allegations that they're hiding it by trying to swap the two Lynns, and so that's being sorted out now. There's honestly, I think the more concerning stuff for Brooks might be, and he's the state firefighter union boss. He apparently made comments on social media a couple years ago referring to volunteer firefighters as scabs, which is
Scabs?
not gonna scabs. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's not gonna play over terribly well. And there are tensions between organized labor, it's essentially volunteer labor, and I can see where that's coming from. But yeah, that's the Kenzie campaign has kind of shifted their attention over to that point. Plus,
so Brooks went after the volunteer firefighters, the regular folks who volunteer.
This was years ago. This is an old social media post from years ago. He's got nicked on these a couple of times now. One for some comments after a mass shooting, where he's a Second Amendment fan. So that didn't sit well on some corners. He apparently made comments referring to volunteer firefighters as scabs. That I think it could be a problem for him. Plus, I think they're going after him as like the hand-picked Democratic anointed candidate, which is kind of what happened. Like there was a contested 4-way race. Governor, I've interviewed him, and he's said this multiple times, where he wasn't planning on running for Congress until Governor Shapiro tapped him on the shoulder. And so the National Democrats got behind him in a contested primary, and so now they're kind of presenting him with all these kind of gaffes behind him, as Democrats are ignoring this and they're trying to prop up this candidate.
Yeah, this is not really the cycle to be the hand-picked candidate of the party bosses, just the way the electorate is.
But that's the weird thing about it, because yes, that is happening, but he's also gotten the endorsement from he's gotten the mainstream and kind of the left-wing endorsements as well. So he's kind of gotten the blessing from just about every corner, where Bernie Sanders was formally endorsed him before Shapiro did. So you see kind of all wings of the party uniting behind the guy. He's a longtime labor guy. He rushed into burning buildings for a living. People, there is kind of something to be said for that. But at the same time, there is a lot of baggage counterweighing it as well. So it creates this very odd dynamic.
So here in the 10th district, I've described it as kind of, what's old is new again. There's really not any difference between Scott Perry of 2026 and Scott Perry of 2024. Janelle Stelson is still the same person she is this year that she was in 2024. So I almost want to call it kind of like the zombie rematch, right? Because they're kind of the same people. The environment's different. Obviously in 2024, Republicans won every statewide seat on the ballot. And then last year, 2025, Democrats won the retention races and won the statewide judicial races from that time. So we're here in this environment now where the president's underwater in his approval rating in all 4 of these districts. And that has what really has, I think, helped Democrats, 1, get a good recruiting class, and 2, raise all this money. And these races are all within 125 miles of each other here, which gives us another reason to call ourselves the Keystone State. Once around, Borys, we'll start with you. Give us your conclusions on Pennsylvania 8 briefly, and what do you think is going to come down the pike?
I think actually in all 4 of the races, maybe as we've talked, less so in the Fitzpatrick race because he didn't vote for the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and is seen as a bit more of a moderate. I think it's really going to come down to the climate and what influence both Trump has and his underwater numbers, and what influence Governor Shapiro has. He's very openly spending money on all of the contests and going to campaign in all of them. He thinks he can increase his margins in the state house, and he definitely thinks Democrats can win the state Senate for 30 years. So, in fact, Gene DePasquale at that Lackawanna County meeting where they picked a new chair a couple of weeks ago flatly said, we're going to win the Senate. So the whole thing's going to come down to climate and whether or not everybody has. I don't think money is going to be an issue. I think there's going to be plenty of money for everybody.
Gene DePasquale, by the way, Eugene DePasquale is former two-term Auditor General and the chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party.
That's right. So I think it's going to come down to climate and to the environment, and the environment right now does not look good for the Republicans. I think most observers fairly think that it's going to be a Democratic wave, just a matter of how large and what are the limiting factors like this.
Your conclusions on PA7 briefly?
I would agree with a lot of what Borys just said. Like we saw, like historically speaking, this is reminding me a lot of 2018 with that blue wave. There are some important differences here, but it's another Trump midterm. We've seen before that the party struggles with his agenda when he's not on the ballot. And so at least in PA7, 2024 was a 1-point race. And that was with kind of like an ideal scenario with Donald Trump leading the ballot. In this case, you have a very popular Democratic governor who's openly campaigning for Bob Brooks, the Democratic candidate for Congress. And history says that the party in power loses seats. And like these are some of the first seats you would expect to see swing in that scenario. In Lehigh County and in Northampton County, we saw executive races last year that were decided by 20 points, which is way outside the norm. And it's kind of touches on that national atmosphere. Now, I expect Ryan McKenzie to run a better campaign than that. Like I say, he's really disciplined, but he has his work cut out for him if he's going to be a two-term congressman.
Fallon? Fitzpatrick versus Harvey there in PA1?
Yeah, what makes the midterms this year especially interesting is that Bucks County is always a wild card. It is one of the most purple counties in the entire state. Fitzpatrick has won before when Shapiro has been at the top of the ticket, been on the ticket. He won re-election in 2024 when Vice President Harris won the first congressional district. So you really never know what's going to happen. I think what will be important to watch for is whether Bob Harvey can peel off independent voters that have voted for Fitzpatrick in the past, some Republican voters who have voted for Fitzpatrick in the past, and even there's been Democrats, I'm sure, who have voted for Fitzpatrick, kind of given his moderate stance on issues. And so it'll just be interesting to see what he's able to accomplish in terms of that, the resources that the National Party is going to dedicate to this race on both sides. And I think just looking at all four districts as a whole, it'll be really interesting at the end to see the combinations almost that end up happening, which party has won which districts, and kind of looking at full picture in the end where Democrats have been successful and where Republicans have been. And so there is a lot to watch for here.
So I'll wrap up the 10th in all of these. In 2024, people could afford, these Republicans, to run behind Trump, and they could still win. So in the 8th district, for example, Trump got 54 and Bresnahan got almost 51. In the 7th district, Trump got 51, Ryan McKenzie got 50.5. Now, not only is Trump not on the ballot, but his approval numbers are underwater. So this year to survive, all of them, including Scott Perry, who's the longest tenured, they're going to of these four, they're going to have to run ahead of Trump's approval numbers. And that is just a different type of challenge, a different type of animal to fight. So again, I want to say thank you to all of you for coming in and helping us here on the PPD Pod, part 3 of our look at Pennsylvania's 4 hot congressional races. And to follow your coverage, Fallon, and everyone, tell us where we can find your writing, Fallon.
Yes, you can find my writing in print or online at the Philadelphia Inquirer website, and my Twitter, also where I post a lot of my coverage, is at Fallon Roth _.
Thank you. Tom, how about you? Where can folks find your writing and thinking?
Sure. You can check me out at LehighValleyPublicMedia.org. There's also Political Pulse newsletter that I send out that kind of touches on a lot of that, as well as some pointing to some writing from other outlets in the region and the state. And there's also a weekly podcast, Lehigh Valley Political Pulse. You can find that on PBS 39 if you're in the broadcast range, or on the Lehigh Valley Public Media YouTube channel.
Borys, how about you?
I'm a lot simpler. WVIA.org/news.
Okay. Again, thanks for your time, everybody. I know one thing for sure. None of you, myself included, will run out of things to write about on these congressional races from now until November 3rd. So again, thanks for being with us. Take care. Have a good day. And
Right.
thank you, everyone, to watching and listening.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
See you guys.